that matter? I think the answer is yes. Ken Laval and Fred Thiel, who are the senator and assembly folks from this area that have been around for a while, fully understand the opportunity. And Allison's job and that of the program going forward is to make our needs known. I would suggest that we should be advancing something to the management committee, laying out what we think our most important priorities are and the nature of how that should be addressed over the same 5-year period. I appreciate the question. Great question.
I had one other point that I read recently, that there's a chance that the western portion of the Erie Canal is being in jeopardy of being closed completely. That's going to take a lot of money to keep that open if there's a push for keeping that open. So I would imagine that the state, if they want to keep it open, is going to be putting a lot of money towards that.
Well, I would hope that's a federal problem more than it is a state problem, but I take your point. Listen, the good news and the bad news is that water quality is a problem on Long Island and in other parts of the state. That's the bad news. The good news is the problem and the prevalence of it is starting to make certain public officials respond differently than they have. So, and then the challenge will be people that have well thought through projects and well thought through strategies will be the ones that everybody will be looking to be early adapters and early starters with the money. And the people that really don't know anything, haven't been focusing on too much, highly confused and disorganized, they will be the people that get the money last because they're all fighting with each other. So our strategy is advance a coherent, lucid way forward, and maybe we'll get lucky. And we'll also work hard, but we will need your collective help to do that. And you will be getting emails to that effect going forward about what that means.
And part of the reason that a program like ours is successful is because we do all that work in between these opportunities, so that when an announcement like this is made, we've got a list of priorities and actions and projects to talk to the state about what needs to be done.
It's one last point. I mean, if there's enough of an interest, and we'll go through, by the time we get through the agenda, if there's enough of an interest, from time to time, people from the East End of Long Island have gone to Albany and we had essentially a one-day lobby day. Now, the agency people aren't allowed to do that, but we can because we're private citizens. So if there's an interest that people would want to have to go to Albany before the budget and let people know where the Peconic Estuary in the East End of Long Island is, B, make it clear about what our priorities are, which will help get developed and sort of presented in a nice way. Sticking your nose or other body parts in front of other legislators as a way to be recognized, acknowledged, and not forgotten is always a good move. So if people think that's a good idea and they have an interest, please stick your hand up, and then we'll think about how we would do that probably sometime in March, early March. So anybody interested in that, let me know.
I have a very long nose, and we already wrote a pilot project. So one of the reasons we're here as RECA is we would like to start engaging in some sponsorship from some of you, because we, as private citizens who happen to own our beach, we're very interested in participating. So I think there are a lot of other smaller organizations like ours that if we could get a hold of. I don't know about you guys, but we'd be happy to go to Albany, all of us.
Is there an interest in going to Albany? If anybody, I'm not asking you to commit today. But if everybody says, listen, there's no way we want to go, we have no interest, that's also what we want to know.
That will be Florida.
We'll all go to Florida instead and Skype in. No, that's quite all right.
I think he could use his voice though.
Yeah. Hard to ignore. All right. For another day, yes.
So what percentage of the budget, however that's defined, comes from the feds and how much comes from the state?
The budget for what?
I don't know, whatever we're talking about here.
Well, that's a longer
That's a
story.
loaded question.
So you guys grab a chair and put it around the table.
Yeah.
It's you know, you can squeeze in here if you want.
I'm going to try to attempt a short answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for the Peconic Estuary program, the majority of our funding comes from the federal government. We do get a little bit from the state and a little bit from the county directly, and then some more from the state and the county in other projects that they're working on in the watershed. Matches up. The primary support is central, through a grant.
I'm guessing that the reason for the question is the increases on grants on the EPA will come down.
It will certainly impact us. It's not clear how yet. It's very little and absolutely zero official information.
So, these things go in cycles, and cycle this time is the governor of the state is putting in more money than they have in the last 10 or 12 years, just as the federal government is in a moment of uncertainty, would be fairly important. And that eventually will sort itself out one way or another, and we have to keep moving. So
The other thing is though, those two county and state efforts that I just mentioned that are doing a lot to implement what we need in Peconic Estuary to reduce nitrogen pollution, those are actually both funded by New York State.
Right.
Even the work the county is doing, the county is contributing some, but a large amount of that funding is coming from New York State, and then the line up, the state-led effort is all coming from New York State.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We're Southampton, so we were looking at Prop 1 funds. Is that an option for us for within the township?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's where we were going with the Peconic tax being voted up. So do these jurisdictions play nice together when it comes to funding, or does everybody tell you to go see someone else?
That's a good question. So our program actually has put a lot of energy over the last couple of years in helping them work better together. We sort of brought them together around stormwater initially, and now that the CPF stuff is all moving forward, that is going to translate hopefully into broader cooperation on implementing the CPF. And in some ways, they're all very protective of their CPF funding because they all have their own priorities, and some have more than others, as we all know. But everyone has given themselves the option, at least, to pool some of that money and give it directly to the Peconic Estuary program. The logistics of how that works out are to be determined. But I think the idea there is that if all the towns are willing, that's a way that they can take a little bit and cooperate with it while still keeping most of it for their own individual
So
TBD.
in an effort to stay on the agenda and make sure that we get through the things that you have to get through, and then we can have a general discussion. We have time for a general discussion, and if not, we can take a phone number. Listen, it's great to have interest, so we don't complain. Christy, let's get back on the agenda and proceed.
All right, so we're up to the CAC Ambassador Talking Points. So if you have not been to a CAC meeting before, every time we can have a meeting, I'll hand out these talking points so that people can be informed on the most up-to-date events that are occurring. So a lot of this has remained the same since the last CAC meeting, which was only in November, but there are a couple of new updates that I want to go through, and I just want to visit the CPF, just so that everybody is clear on all the elections and what happened and what this means for the future. So in case you don't know, the CPF is the Community Preservation Fund, and it was established in 1999. And up until this point, it's been mostly used to preserve land. But as time goes on, there's less and less land to be able to protect. So there's this excess of money, and people want to be able to use it. So there was a vote in November as to whether or not up to 20% of that CPF revenue could be used for water quality improvement on the east end. And each town would have their own say as to how that was spent. So it's not all 5 towns that need to come to one decision. Each town can have their own agenda as to how they're going to use that. So that CPF passed, and not only did it pass in all 5 towns, but that is also going to increase, continue through 2050. So the CPF revenue will continue every time somebody buys a home out of the east end. So long as I believe it's not a first-time homeowner. I believe that was the exception. So, does anybody have any questions on that, or maybe Al, do you have any insight into what your town is going to be planning to do with the money?
I think it's really town by town specific, because some towns have an abundance of funds, and they really are focused on using up to the 20% for water quality. Some still have an awful lot of. Southwold has a very active land preservation program, but very little money coming in, 5 to 6 million a year, which does not go far, and a great deal of unprotected farmland is left. And Riverhead does not have enough money to cover, coming in to cover its debt because it borrowed against future revenues and really needed an extension of 2050 to refinance and pay that debt off. So every town, I think from the North Fork, except we love everyone to pool their resources. The South Fork is most of the time. No one's volunteered. That's been the problem. So in Southwood, I just actually met with the supervisor yesterday. One of the things we were talking about is that land preservation is still a priority because we have an awful lot of land left to preserve. The more you preserve, the less you have to worry about any other septic system or anything like that. So I think that's going to be the focus there. So talk about pooling money and at different levels of government using money. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. If the county has a fund to upgrade septics, the state is going to play a role.
Yeah, the solution at the end of this, when there are people in this room who live this every day, and like Allison and other staff do. So the strategy here is to develop a funding pie, like a pizza pie, where you have slices of different contributing sources, the sum of which present the funding by which a comprehensive strategy to address water quality can be achieved. And we take the opportunities as they present themselves, and we make the opportunities when we can. So over 80% of the public in most towns voted for the Community Preservation Fund extension, which was, if there was ever a mandate, that was it. Keep buying land, protect water. Thank you very much. That was the message, which is a good message. So our job is to convert that into other subsequent messages of continued strategies along the line. Keep going.
Okay. So to be continued on that, we'll make sure that we stay in contact with the towns and see what their plans are going to be, keep everybody involved and informed. So that's one thing that you can talk to your community about, as well as other issues on this sheet as well. But I'd like to flip to the second page. And this is something that you can do that's going to be more interactive, more hands-on, if you will. So firstly, we have been in the process of updating our Ctmp, the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan. So in 2016, every CAC meeting that we held, we were gathering information, public input on why the estuary is important to you. What do you want to see protected? And so we gather all of that information, but we're continuing to gather information. So we have surveys at the back of the room. So if you have not filled one out yet, I encourage you to do so, or to take one and give it to a friend that you know, a local business owner that you know, so that they can have their input as well. Because the more that we get back from the public, the more that we can include that and know what's important to you to put into this document. So if water quality is really important to you, sea level rise, write those things down so that we really understand what the people want, because that's what we're trying to aim at, is figure out what's important to you guys, and then really focus on that and other issues within the CCMP for this long-term plan. So I encourage everybody to do that, and we're going to go over that in a little bit more detail, the results from last year, but I just want to let everybody know that please, if you have not participated yet, please do so. And I can also email it to anybody as well if you want to send it out to friends, family, business owners, etc., different organizations. So on to the next one, the fishing line receptacles title there. In December 2016, so just a few months ago, we had volunteers help assemble fishing line receptacles. And so these are going to be placed around the Peconic Estuary, so closer to the bay side. We have a few of them up already. They're on the DEC launch site on the upper Peconic River. And we have 2 of them installed on the river park, the waterfront there, that part. So we have 2 of them up there as well, and we're going to continue placing them. But we do still have some upstairs that we need to get installed right now because it's a bit too cold. And well, the ground isn't frozen today technically, but it dips back and forth. So we may wait until March. But if anybody has any ideas, popular fishing sites, or if you already know where one of these is installed, we would love to know that information, because we're going to compile all of this data and create a map so that any fisherman, recreational or otherwise, can go onto this map and see exactly where these receptacles are, so people can dispose of their fishing line and not just throw it anywhere. And specifically monofilament, because we can send it out to be recycled. So we're not just collecting it, but we're also going to send it out to be recycled as well. So we would love to have your help to either, one, let us know the location that you think would be preferable, that has a lot of fishing activities. And then also, if you know of others, so that if people are fishing not at the sites where we have these receptacles, they're still aware of where they are. So does anybody know of any right now? Yeah.
Yeah, New Suffolk Beach, now it's got pretty much stormed out. There's two spots. There's one at the new waterfront and the old, very old, like boat lift was. And there's like a walkout spot. And then at the end, that technically belongs to Robbins Island.
Okay.
But the public is always out there at the end. And it's mostly Spanish-speaking population.
So these receptacles have both English and Spanish signs on them.
Well, yeah. And but right now it should be a little inland because the tides are coming up further and further. The Suffolk, between Suffolk and Adelaide, it's almost always flooded these days.
Okay, so the New Suffolk Beach is where you said both of these. So you said there's two. Okay, then.
There's two locations. I checked after I saw your email this week if there were any, and I didn't see any yet.
Okay, great. So hopefully some of you got that email because we're asking for everybody, not just CAC members, but any volunteers. Or people that we've reached at outreach events along the way. So more information, the better.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just curious. I'm kind of new to this whole thing. And are these receptacles? These are being placed near fishing areas, or what are they?
Discarded one.
Discarding fishing
So-
line.
So fishermen have extra line or broken line,
Yes,
and that's what they're just going to have to put their fishing line in.
exactly. Because this type of plastic, this marine pollution, is very harmful to the organisms that live there, especially animals themselves. They can become entangled in it, they can ingest it. So it's very, very harmful for the marine environment.
Are they finding that fishermen are using these receptacles?
So that's the point, is to increase the use. However, a lot of fishing and bait stores do have areas where people can go and throw out their line. We're going to find that out because we're going to go and actually collect whatever is deposited and have records that are being kept of how full was it and what was it filled with. So we have actual data to go back and look at and say, you know what, that receptacle really isn't being used. Maybe we should move it to this other location.
Sean?
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later, I would say railroad dock and Report.
Railroad dock.
Everyone starts squid fishing there pretty soon, sometime beginning of April. So.
Okay,
I'm just gonna maintain these.
we are.
So,
Can you get communities? There's one down in Goldsmiths in Peconic.
Goldsmiths and what?
And I know it's used by people, but I don't know who maintains it.
so I'm gonna
one-
suggest,
This should be an email.
we can spend another minute on this.
Yes.
But what, rather than everybody going around, just having a free association of places they know where people fish, which doesn't do you much good. Emailing to Christie specific locations that, you know, A, are popular, B, have a lot of people, and then presumably would benefit from having a receptacle.
Okay.
Would be a good way to proceed. Go ahead.
I was just quickly, Manatuck Inlet, used to be Mims, and now took it by storms, big fishing boats go out of there every day, right at the entrance from the sound at the Manatuck River.
Okay.
It's called Storms now,
Okay.
just was used to be called Mims, but it would be a good spot, a lot of fishing.
Great. To answer somebody's question over here about using community members, first, I want to make sure that what people are actually disposing is safe, because when you unscrew the bottom and everything comes out, you have to use, I'd like to use some sort of wire to pull it all out, just in case somebody's put something in there that's dangerous, you don't want to reach your hand up and grab it. Exactly. So until I sort of figure out the logistics of that, I don't want to send anybody out to potentially get hurt.
I think you could get neighborhood associations and whatnot that'd be happy to do.
And that would be great. So as long as people are informed about it and they know the risks and how to handle everything, I think that's a great idea, and to move towards that eventually. So that
Wouldn't be a bad idea to ask marina operators also to, I mean, you know, the probability that marinas see more fishing poles around than any other business on Long Island is reasonably high. So,
Basically, any of the
Maria?
town lighting
I would
areas.
just suggest the whole Palm Park Bridge.
Yep.
There's
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
lot
And
of
the
fishing
inlets and
and-
all those
Yeah.
places. Again,
lot of
this
fishing.
will all come to people at midnight.
Yeah.
Don't call Chrissy at midnight, send her an email.
Christie
That
at
says,
Clark or
check
at
this
your
area.
email?
I'm sorry?
Where do you email?
To the CAC.
To the CAC.
Yes, it's at the very end of this, the third page, it has contact us, it's cac@peconic.org, so that's where you're gonna send it to. So, where you know they already exist, or where it might be good spots to place them within the Peconic estuary, so they have to be on the bay side.
Question,
There's
right
going
over
to be
here.
an interactive map. Where is that going to be hosted? Is that on the Peconic Estuary program, or is that meant to be hosted, say, at the DEC, where recreational fishermen are more actively going? Like, who's going to find this map and utilize it?
So we are going to have that on our website. We would hope that others will learn about it and use it as well. But we are in the process of updating our current website so it's more easy to navigate. Right now it's quite difficult. So we're gonna have these maps easier to find and locate and actually scroll through on a map, on a Google map, to be able to like pinpoint and see photos of where they're located.
I'm just thinking, like, if I'm a recreational fisherman, the Peconic Estuary program is not the first place.
And that's what we want to come up. Yeah, we want to change that. We want people to come to us for this general information.
So looking on a brook, fishing out of plastic bottles a lot, has there been any discussion with the towns about including a recycle bin alongside of these things?
There has not been, but that's a good idea. We can talk about that as well.
If I could just see some plastic bottles go into containers instead of into the water, that would be nice.
Mhm.
Keep going, Chrissy.
Okay, so after that, the next thing that you can do that's really hands-on instead of just going around the community and discussing all this, because again, the more information you get from other people, the more receptacles we know about, et cetera, et cetera. So the next one I just want to jump down to, in case you guys are not familiar, there is a local fertilizer ban from November 1st to April 1st. So that within Suffolk County lawn fertilizer is not to be applied to anybody's lawn. So with that being said, any establishment, any business, whether it's privately owned or a large corporation that sells fertilizer in Suffolk County has to place signage that informs people of this ban, so that if you buy it, you're knowing that you cannot apply it until after April 1st, or starting April 1st. Starting April 1st. So if you guys happen to go to any stores that you know of that sell fertilizer, if you're there just shopping, stop by the fertilizer section, see if that sign is hanging up, and just send an email and let me know, hey, I went to this location and I saw the sign there. And that's it. It can be as simple as that. Just to gather that information to make sure that people are being informed of this. Do you have a question, or are you discussing? So that's one way that you can help. Just so you know, the Riverhead and the Riverhead locations, Lowe's and Home Depot were already checked out. We both have them. So those two places are already done, so that we're not overlapping here. But we're at the very start of this, so we don't have a huge database yet on all of this information.
How about on the Ace Hardware?
That's a great idea. If anybody stops by Ace Hardware, maybe on your way home, you have 5 minutes just to walk in and check. It's a
I
great
mean,
idea.
if you're friendly with your local hardware store operator, in an effort not to have a confrontation, just say, by the way, please put up a notice, sign it for the application times, in a friendly way rather than a threatening, obnoxious, irritating way, which is how most of us behave.
And if you're not comfortable with that confrontation, just email and say, hey, I went to the store and the sign was not up. And I can even stop by and say, hey, did you know that you're supposed to have this signage up? And we can take care of that. So don't feel pressured to have that conversation.
Is it a standard sign?
I'm sorry?
Is it like a standard downloadable sign?
Yeah, it's a man that's pushing a fertilizer
On water.
on water.
The county provides it to all the hardware stores.
Oh, they do?
They've provided to them all once, and upon request, they will provide new ones.
So this is going to show my left coast roots, but are the fish kills being turned into fish fertilizer?
Not necessarily.
Why not?
No.
It's too hard to pick up all the dead fish.
Well, they're picking them up. It's a little stinky.
I can say that we were approached about this with Rick Knight here at Hampton Bays Middle School. They wanted to do projects specifically to do this, and they reached out to DEC about this and got a lot of I wouldn't do it if I were you kind of thing. So,
Wow.
Okay.
Back in 2009, when there was a fish kill, they did do that, and there was a pretty big backlash from the community about the the smell of it. So they collected it, some farmers were happy to use fertilizer in their field. So according to the DEC, they're not encouraging anyone to do it because last time they did, it was a nuisance odor issue.
It's a historic use. They used to put down about 15,000 fish per acre.
Yeah,
But if everyone does it, if everyone smells the same.
I'm talking about
You're not
a
offending
different
everyone.
So it might be
residential
locker room
1 gallon
trash.
use. Because again,
No, it
being
should
from
be.
Washington State, we're born earth muffins, right? The best way to do this is not to put it on farmlands, it's to put it in 1 gallon containers for residential use, and any woman who grows roses will buy it.
Certain things on the West Coast.
Yeah.
You're right.
We appreciate the people
fertilizer
from the West.
Yeah, well, like I said, my little earth muffin is a It's a waste of the resource.
We agree, we agree. Listen, if we're very fortunate,
Southampton was composting.
Yeah, Southampton was.
But not for residential, but they were composting it to make it go away.
yeah, yeah.
That's it.
yeah.
They used to
Let's
make
hope we're not
stuff.
spending too much time on fish kill management going forward. But the point is, if it does become more normalized as an occurrence, a more coherent response may be required.
Absolutely.
Going forward. Keep going, Christie. 'cause
Okay,
holding on.
so everything else, I think that you can really read through on your own, and if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. Those are more hands-on opportunities. Everything else is just knowing as much as you can to communicate that with everybody else that you know and help spread the word. So with that being said, yeah.
Please, or should I know?
Depends. What
Drawings under the stop throwing away, why does it say herbicide as well as pesticide?
Yeah.
Pesticides and
Broader
herbicides?
category, herbicides are a subcategory.
Insecticides,
And herbicide.
fungicides, they're all pesticides.
Yes, correct.
Rodenticides, they're all pesticides.
So those are all included under pesticides?
Yeah, herbicides, they're all,
Okay,
they're all
perfect.
covered.
Keep going.
Okay, onward then. So the next item on the agenda is to talk about the Ctmp public input surveys. I mentioned this briefly before. So I just wanted to talk to you guys about what the overall summary, what we learned from last year from collecting all this information, because we didn't just collect it from CAC members, we also got it from every volunteer that we could get a hold of, and every outreach opportunity, we were always asking people for their feedback. So as a quick summary, I just want to put this out there and then hear if there's anything that was missing. If you didn't get to put your input in, you just want to say your piece, we can include it now. And then we also have the survey so you can have some detailed information officially submitted. But with reviewing everything from last year, people associated a healthy estuary with healthy fish and shellfish stocks, which isn't too surprising. The reason to protect the estuary, the top 3 were for recreational activities. So everyone was talking about fishing, swimming, just using this estuary recreationally for your own uses. For protecting, the second one was preserving resources, and the third for maintaining the economy and the property values. So those were the main reasons why people wanted to protect the estuary in the first place, why it's important to you. And the major concern going forward was septic, sewer, and cesspools. So that was of high concern to people. And then also making sure that the towns are coordinating together to accomplish this result. So that summarizes overall what we've learned from last year, and I just wanted to get everybody else's feedback, and if they wanted to add anything to that. Yes?
Were they asked about aquaculture in that survey and the importance of
So
feeding
we
people healthy food that has no pesticides and it's good for the environment?
We have some of these in the back, and it doesn't specifically ask about aquaculture, but we ask in the comment section.
It's a growing area.
It is a growing area.
Peconic Bay is pristine for aquaculture.
That's great. So if you take the survey at the very bottom, it says, at the last page, it says, what have we missed? So if you officially submit that, and aquaculture is really important to you, and you want that included and to be addressed, that's really good information to have.
I'm just wondering if you could include in the survey itself so that people will recognize the significance of aquaculture.
Okay. So you're suggesting putting in an aquaculture specific question?
Oyster is one of the largest, fastest growing areas of
Okay, that's a great suggestion.
And did you update your 2017 survey, and did you provide for like renters versus homeowners? or added the space for renters because it was totally wrong owner.
The public input survey?
Yeah. Yes, the one that you do for your CCMP.
Okay, you think that it's geared more towards homeowners and not towards businesses?
Yeah, we addressed that last
No,
year.
towards renters. I think you're thinking of the one that was specifically related to the homeowner rewards program.
The fertilizer?
No, the one for your comprehensive plan.
Okay. It
Okay,
doesn't
email,
talk about.
that's okay.
Yeah, have a look at it again and tell
Yeah,
us where you
Because
think.
we did.
Yeah, definitely. There's plenty in the back, so if you grab a copy and look through and specifically mention what you're talking about, we can address that as well.
Well, I can see that you maybe one mistake is the same survey for continuing.
Anybody else? Okay, so we have some time if you wanted to go back to the previous discussion. That Kevin, you were having earlier, we have, yeah, Dan?
One point, not to sound like a broken record, but it's great that there's a focus now on sewers and septics and cesspools and understanding the connection between those technologies and water quality. But I think it's important for the public to understand that it's not a technology problem that we have, it's a regulatory failure that we have. It's the level of development that's been improved that's causing the problem, not the technology in and of itself. So even with new technology, if we increase development densities, we're overwhelming that technology with the that farm and end up in the same spot that we're in today. You know, one perfect example of that is the Riverside development approved by the town of Southampton. We're upgrading the Riverhead sewage treatment plant to reduce loads, and at the same time, we're adding 2,200 additional housing units. So I think that's something that the Estuary program should be talking about in terms of, as ambassadors, as we go out and we talk about the need for technologies, we should be talking about the need to reform our regulatory processes and our unsustainable development practices.
I have a question.
Well, go ahead.
So the nitrogen load, do we have a breakdown? Is it residential 80% and 20% agriculture, or where are we targeting the load?
I don't know.
So I can, afterward, I will bring it up on the computer and show it to you. But we do have a breakdown. In Peconic Estuary, roughly, the estuary as a whole now I'm talking, it's approximately a quarter from the atmosphere, a quarter from fertilizer, that's both agricultural and residential, and a half from wastewater. So that's estuary-wide. So it's predominantly a wastewater problem. But that's not the only problem. And then we also have information about each sub-watershed, so, you know, around the different smaller embayments all the way around the estuary. And it's a little different everywhere, as you can imagine. A few North Fork sub-watersheds have a little more dominance from agriculture. On the South Fork, wastewater is even more than 50% in a lot of cases. The far western estuary, obviously the sewage treatment plant is a big load. Everything else is mostly on-site wastewater. So we do have it broken down both ways, but estuary-wide, it's approximately half is
When you say wastewater, is that septic?
Yep.
septic, cesspool, and sewage treatment plants.
I have something on my laptop.
And you can see, there are really nice figures, our Friends of Nature Conservancy created really nice figures with pie charts on the map that will show you those loads. You can find them on our website. And I'm happy to show you where to find them.
I just would like to raise one point sort of to go along with Dan. And that's as soon as people start thinking that we've solved the nitrogen problem by mitigating the flow, they go back to more development. And that's really crux of the problem.
Well, that's, where we have existing development and you improve the treatment of waste in the existing developed area, that is a substantial net reduction. So on my, where I live, on my block, if everybody on my block just switches out new technology in favor of the present technology, you should get nearly 3/4, and with other technology that should be available soon, 90% of pollution reduction should be realized. The concern, which is fair, is that if towns take that understanding and perverted into a strategy that says, well, now we can take all the density and the pollution load that everybody just invested in and put it back somewhere else. Then we just went through an extraordinary social experiment in frustration, because we went through the bother, inconvenience, and cost of changing the systems to end up right back where we were. I don't think anybody thinks that's a good idea. And there will be some pressures for people to exploit that. And the challenge will be on the part of us and better government responsive people to make the case for how that has to be guided.
Yeah,
Wait. It's not that I have faith in human nature, because I don't. The alternative is the status quo permanent, which is also unacceptable. So there's no risk-free way of confronting any change, A, in your life, B, in policy, and C, on water quality. There's just no simple, free way to address this. So we could just meet all the time and say, this is our biggest problem, but we're afraid to do anything. Or we'll go, we have to do something, and now we have to manage for unintended consequences, which may be real, and they may be challenging, and they may be very isolated, but we still have to manage for it. But the notion of we can't do anything because we're stuck here because something bad may happen is a loser's strategy. With all due respect, I know you're not suggesting.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that we implement some sort of regulation and development once we do this. So that
It should happen as we're doing it. I agree.
Yeah, and part of the challenge is that the county regulates wastewater treatment, but the towns regulate
Zoning.
for example. So you have to get at every level of government in order to make sure that all of those different things are managed. So that's where the citizens are really important in holding those people accountable for the promises.
Good.
Without the regulatory change aspect of it, I agree with Kevin in that we do need to do what we can while we can to reduce loads. But without the regulatory aspect of no new loads or a nitrogen neutral and nitrogen negative policy, every bit of new technology we develop and any bit we put into the ground, as we've seen with the proposed Riverside project and Riverhead to a treatment plant, the giant waste.
So I'm going to suggest, to the extent that you're able to, can you articulate out what those principles are, and can we wrap them around to people? Just so that.
No net nitrogen increase right there.
But
That's it.
Again, put some detail into that so that people are understanding. I mean, if you're saying we need a regulatory reform in this form, while, most people would say, yeah, probably. Putting it into practice is a bit more of a challenge. I agree with the no net nitrogen increase from the new technology, not from the present mess we have. Because no net increase over the present mess locks in the present mess, right?
Correct.
Which we don't want to do.
Right, and mitigating in the ground. If the problem is as simple as what you stated on your block, then I would 100% agree that it's simply replacing what we already had. But we have a system where density not only is encouraged, but might be subsidized by county plans to fund more wastewater treatment. Then you're creating a perverse incentive to increase density, and that. Without addressing that first, we're going to subsidize these wastewater treatment plants, and we're gonna get county funds, state funds, make everyone pay into a fee to subsidize more development, without saying that development can't increase nitrogen input. I mean, it's a zero-sum game. You're not really solving it. It's just money. It's just money being passed around from one side to the other. There's winners and losers, and
I think to Kevin's point, sometimes it's not enough to think outside the box. Sometimes you have to reshape the box. We have to have a different mindset about this going forward.
I agree.
And it's not enough to do the things we've done in the past.
I agree.
So I don't think everyone here has these answers yet, but I agree with Kevin, we can find them.
So going from the general to the specific, what are the principles underlying what that means? And I don't have, we've had this conversation offline a few times. I don't have a fundamental disagreement with it. It's go from the general to the specific. Here are the general principles. Here are the elements within that. Now, how do you do it? That's our challenge.
And if
If I
I
can
put
say-
it, just like Prop 1, if 80% of the population says this is not acceptable, then proposing the new technologies or throwing everything we can think of at it, we'll probably get that 80% vote again. Because people realize that poison earth, I don't know if you guys watched Silent Spring, Rachel Carson last night, wonderful. So the thing that I think we also need to be very engaged in the communities, because the children and the schools, all that, they're gonna be right there with us.
I don't disagree with you technology.
No problem. Be happy to talk to anyone.
I'm not disagreeing with you technology.
Yeah, I just watched Lake Washington, where I'm from, go from a sewage lake to the most pristine lake on the West Coast.
How
And
long did that?
it took 20 years, but so,
That's the magic number. So
What is, may I ask a question about Lake Washington? What did they do about the happy fish problem?
about the happy fish problem.
The antidepressants that were being.
Oh, yeah, given to the happy fish.
Waste one.
So it's a combination of things when you approach these things. You have to have upgrade your sewage treatment plants, expand them out. That's a part of the county's plan. And also, I think there's a huge political pressure that needs to happen at every level for people to say this is not acceptable. And that's why I'm saying you're seeing that here now, and that's why I'm encouraged. It doesn't matter what you call it, when you have a citizenship that says, no, this isn't acceptable, and you have interns, full-time, testing everything. I mean, your approach always has to be people, process, project, right? What do the people want? What's the process to get there, and how's the project going to be measured? You have those three things, you get success. So I'm sorry to answer in the larger term, but.
So you don't know how they solve it?
Well, I do know how they solve it.
Well, did they solve it?
Yes, they did. You can go test the water there now, but it required a lot of intervention in not just residential, but business, right? And that's why I was asking about the load, because the agribusinesses here, I think someone over here just mentioned, you know, organic is becoming more and more of a concern. They're also going to have to start figuring out how to not fertilize with this current regime, right? And that was a big part of it. When you have factories sitting on waterways, what are they dumping into it, right? At least we're not in India.
So to recap,
Yeah.
once you accept the premise that what you're doing is no longer working, then you can liberate yourself to think about what else we do, right? So, and is there a risk in it? Yes. And do we need to be sure that we're thinking through all the supported, appropriately aligned other public policy issues? Yes. Will it be easy? No. Will we be frustrated? Yes. Will there be screw-ups? Sure. We have to keep doing it. So please be patient. Christine, keep going.
And just to address the pharmaceutical issue, you can encourage people to use the stop program, stop throwing out pollutants. Every town has one. We are posting them up on Facebook. It's in the talking points. So encouraging people to go and dispose of those pharmaceuticals instead of dumping them down the toilet or down the drain. That's one way that you can help solve that problem. Yes.
Well,
Oh.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Southampton Police Station has a big bin right there to dump your pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. So encourage
The
people to
body
do that.
doesn't absorb them.
Similar to the fertilizer.
Right, and Muriel, just so you know, if the new on-site waste disposal systems that have drain fields are regularly approved, which we hope that will be as of the spring, they remove about 90% of pharmaceutical contamination, which is a lot better than the removal rate in a cesspit where there's virtually no removal. So that's the benefit of new technology. Keep going, Chris.
No, you can talk. We're gonna move on to the next point. So I was just gonna set up the next part. So if any last minute comments, please feel free.
Could we have a
Yes.
sign also at the pump?
Go ahead.
Well, if you're requiring places with self-fertilizer to tell people not to use.
Suffolk County.
Yes.
County.
Why can't they also require people, require these signs to say, if you use more water, if you fertilize?
I think most people understand that.
No, I don't think most people understand that at all, because I'm always telling them.
Okay.
Any last minute? Did you have a comment?
I wanted to say about the pharmaceuticals. We do host, I know in Legislative Fleming's district, we do the Narcan classes where we do drug takebacks. We just had one in, at the Sac Harbor Firehouse. We're gonna have another one at West Hampton Beach Firehouse on February 6th, and we do have police officers there and like that. So that's another way, you know, to dispose of those.
And how do they dispose of them?
Well, the police department takes them and,
They incinerate them.
Yeah, but they take them to the DEC, I believe.
I would say that for the fertilizer application ban sign, I think it's a really good idea that people help you out by checking out the stores. But I would just maybe even via the next email, include a picture of that sign so they know what they're looking for.
Sure.
Yeah. So this way you're not getting false reports.
That's why I asked.
And whatever the information is, it's very soft data, right? So we're you know, let's be careful not to draw militant conclusions.
Kevin, also, I still think that there's some point of disconnect going on, sort of on a minor level, like what Muriel was talking about, we said most people don't know about the increased water usage. I don't think a lot of people still know that the nitrogen, allowed nitrogen levels for drinking water will kill fish, and that there's a big disconnect between that and what you need to have to sustain aquatic life.
I agree with that. I think that's an impossible communication to the public at a level that most human beings operate at. So we have to reduce that down into something vastly more simple, which is still a challenge. But there is a nitrogen working group. It is part of the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan and includes industry representatives, self-fertilizer, applied fertilizer, landscapers, the ag industry people, and there's I think a sincere effort underway to see how do we modernize what we do, recognizing that, to steal a phrase from our last conversation, what we're doing isn't necessarily working. And what does improvement look like? And not just marginal improvement, but real improvement. So, you know, stay tuned.
So maybe I can just add real quick to that. So it is a communication challenge, but I think that part of the goal of Christie handing these things out and trying to foster this CAC ambassador thing is so that folks like you who are a little more engaged than the average person is sort of armed with the information to go to a cocktail party and talk to their friends about exactly what you're saying. So just on that specific topic, what I tell people is that for many years, we were managing for a target that was drinking water that was safe, right? So, you know, we use this solution as the solution to pollution method. We spread everybody out on the east end, and our drinking water, for the most part, with a few exceptions, has a nitrogen low enough that it's not killing any of us to drink our tap water. Now we recognize that it was the wrong target. It was a good target, but it was not the right target. So that target is far too high to keep our surface waters healthy. And all this work that we were talking about that's going on is all about developing that new target so that we can bring down that load that we have been creating for the last 20 years. So I think when you talk to your friends, I think what you said is exactly right. It's really important to help everyone we know, and then they'll tell somebody they know, and they'll tell somebody that they know, and that's how this information gets out. Christy spends a lot of time doing educational programs and outreach, and you know, she reaches hundreds, maybe a couple thousand people. We have 1.5 million on Long Island. We need everybody's effort on that. So, you know, what you said is exactly right, and you should tell everybody you know that. The exact technical details aren't necessary for everyone, as long as they understand that the reason they should support these efforts that people are trying to do, the reason they should be willing to upgrade their septic tank if they're told they should do that, all that kind of stuff, the reason they should go to a public meeting and oppose a new development that quadruples density, all those things are all about that nitrogen load into the surface water. So I do think it's really important what you said, that all of us need to kind of be a voice out there spreading that.
And you can do that not only in person, but on social media as well. That's a big tool. And even if it's as simple as you're bored one night at home and you go on the Pine Estuary program page and share something or like something, it can be as simple as that.
Two quick comments of points. You know, one is I don't think it's not 100% accepted that the level of nitrogen in drinking water is actually safe long-term for people, in other words, that it does not have any harmful effects. This presumption that is correct, but there's challenges to that. And the second is that I think most probably don't realize that as the nitrogen level in the water that's used for irrigating and drinking goes up, the need for fertilizer goes down. In other words, when you're actually watering your lawn now, you're actually fertilizing it because the nitrogen level of the water is being used.
All right.
Yeah.
All really great points. I think this was a great discussion. We're going to move on to the presentation portion. But what we'd like to do is get some real-time feedback. So I'm going to ask everybody to pull out their phones. We're going to do one question ahead of time, and then the rest of them after the presentation. Yes?
I'd just like to point out that oysters mitigate nitrogen in water, so aquaculture for oysters should be encouraged because it is very helpful with nitrogen.
Great. And we'll include that comment that you had and look into adjusting the public input survey.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Water quality, nitrogen, and so forth, is a major problem. A major problem. And we have developed now, to hopefully our advantage, someone from Queens who is a Long Islander, who I'm sure is very interested in Long Island, and could be a great help to us on Long Island. He uses Twitter
Yeah.
all the time to get to us. I think we should go try and get to him as much as possible, pushing our need for his help. He's a Long Islander. He's the guy that we got to reach. The federal government is the government that should be coming into this. It's a major problem. We got to have a cure, let them fix the big need. Send it out, inundate him with requests from Long Islanders. Please help us. Just a suggestion, but I think that's a way to go in the future, using the new technology and his favorite instrument, Twitter.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. He's a Long Islander. Remember, he's from Long Island. He's a help. He could be a big help to us. Don't be afraid to get after the government, the federal government. Get him. Tell him we need big help.
I was wondering if that would be a case of be careful what you ask for.
So our program and all the estuary programs around the country and some of our friends in the National Australian Research Reserves, every year around Valentine's Day, do a social media campaign exactly like that. We have hashtag #IHeartEstuaries, and everybody tweets and posts on Instagram and Facebook photos of their estuary, factoids about why you love your estuary, all that sort of thing. You will see emails and Facebook and social media posts from Christy that you can share and like and retweet, and you can make up your own. You will see more information about that coming from our program soon, but that's just an example of a way that you can participate in exactly what you were just describing.
It's free, right?
Free. It's free.
Free.
And it's quick, it's easy, you can do it,
Free.
you know.
Don't have to mail anything. You send it to him. Say, hey, Donald, here, do something.
I know Congressman Lee Zeldin has well aware of what the program is doing.
Kenny Lavelle.
All of them understand the problem. I would be stunned in a federal infrastructure discussion that Lee Zeldin isn't talking about what does the use stand for. No doubt in my mind. We will double back to be sure that that message is understood.
Great.
Keep going, Kristen.
All right, so before we begin, and if you don't know the answer to this question, that's fine, but I'm going to set you guys up. Before we start, know that if you do not have an unlimited text plan, then this will count towards your text, and that this program is not going to spam your phone number. So when you join, it'll unjoin you, and it's not going to be used in any other manner. So it's a safe program to use for this. So all you need to do is open up your text message as if you're going to text your friend, your mom, your dad, your sister, whoever. So you open up a new text message, and who you're sending it to is the number 22333. So that's who the message is going to go to. And in the body of the message, when you would say, hey, what do you want for dinner? Instead, you're going to put my information. So you're going to text Christy, CHRIS, TIEPFOE 976. And that's going to join you to this pole. So that's what you're putting in the body. It's right up there on the left-hand side. I'm gonna have to walk in front of the camera.
Yeah, and,
So you guys see here? So you're gonna text this in the body to this number, and you should get a response that says that you've joined the poll. Anybody done that yet? Yes?
You have to add you as a contact first, because it's not finding you.
You should be able to just send it to this number.
You send it to 22333.
Okay, I got it.
yeah, this building.
Great, this will be the one you send.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all failing for service.
Oh, no, you can't service. Does anybody,
We don't
Scott,
have
do you know the
Wi-Fi here.
information to connect to the internet here?
I got it.
You're in?
Downstairs.
It says
Yeah.
participate, we have 7 people.
Is it
Nine.
0 or an O?
If
after
you're
your name?
connecting to the Wi-Fi down here,
We have 10 people.
it's Cornell 1234, or CCE guest is the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Do they have it?
Yeah, that's the again.
So that's the password.
Cornell 1234, all lowercase.
No, it's just, I'll put it back up. I'll put it right back up now.
Actually, can you go back to the?
It just took us a while, we're on.
Here we go. So
Yeah,
Christy,
yeah.
PFOE 976.
Is that a 0?
It's an O, like kind of last name.
So yes, you got your.
That's why we left plenty of time to get through this.
Okay, for this. So you gotta text it to Christy. Text Christy.
That's
This is the
message.
number to text to.
I think you're texting mom
This
or
is the
dad.
message to text to Christy. Then you should get a response back saying you're on the thing, and then you put in your.
So the question is, if you're already logged in, if you're not, don't worry, take some time. The question is, what do you think is the main source of pathogens to the local waterways? You can put in whatever you think. If you don't know the answer, you can say, I don't know. Because hopefully that answer will either change or maybe stay the same after this presentation.
Okay.
And so this is all anonymous. The answers are just coming in. That is a good one. Me, apparently. Yeah.
Christy
See what I think.
Gone off good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll ask this question again. We'll have a couple after. And everyone that's listening remotely, you can participate too. It's just sending a text message.
This is just texting, you're not having to go below it.
Nope, it's just a text message.
We just answer your question?
Yeah, you just answer your question.
After it comes back to you and says you have joined, then you can, then you're just texting.
So that's, it's just as long as.
This is their program.
Okay, so now you think,
Oh, okay.
People can link.
So your presentation is up here. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what clicker is, but you can use this.
Did UC ever finish their pathogen update report? Do we ever know what became of that? Yeah.
That's what I was.
I think they're working on.
Okay. Sounds sad, but. All right.
But they had identified certain highland areas of risk, right?
Yes.
Are they updating it?
They're trying to update it. I think they're trying to go back for some more bodies that may not have an update as really be considered as a priority area. So I think they're just going back and trying to do all the TMDLs for all of the bodies and maybe taking some out.
It's fine.
You can move it around if you need to.
All right. I'm a little worried about time, so.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, can I
so
run
what
through
is
this?
our-
Okay, so I'm Scott Turtolo-Wagman. I work for Cornell. I've been here 18 years. For most of the time I've been here, I've been doing this program, which is bacterial source tracking when it comes to what's in our waterways. So kind of going along with what we just looked at with.
Doesn't like it? Okay, you can click.
So the answer to the question is stormwater is what is the leading cause when it comes to non-point source solutions. There's two different types. Point source, which is when it's known, which is going to be basically a sewage treatment plant. That is a point source. Everything else is known as a non-point source. So it's an unknown. So how this all kind of started is it started kind of with shellfishing. And some shellfishers had come to Emerson Hasbrook, who had kind of started this project. And they wanted to get areas open for shellfishing again. Many people don't know, but for areas that are certified for shellfish by the New York State DEC, it's actually cleaner in than ones that may be open to bathing by the county. So there's a very strict standard to have these areas open, mostly due to FDA things where you're consuming the shellfish. So it started off with just doing bacterial enumeration for the E. coli to try to see where the areas were of high bacteria to coincide with what the DEC was doing. But then once you find these areas of high bacteria concentration, it then becomes, well, fine, there's lots of bacteria in there. Whose is it and how is it getting there? How is it getting there is usually through stormwater runoff. And way back when the first Peconic Ctmp was first done, stormwater runoff is one of the major sources of pathogens in the estuary. So we started doing this as a way to identify what's in the water. And it's based on presumption that every animal has a different strain of E. coli that resides in their intestinal tract. So what this actually meant was way back when, one of my first jobs was collecting scat. So it gave new meaning to having a crappy job. So what we did is we identified animals that were mostly going to be found around the Peconic Estuary. This was actually funded initially through the US EPA. So we wanted to build up a library of what was the known sources of things that would be found near water bodies that would be contributing. But once the storm comes, they're picking up all the scat that's along either roadways or in fields, and it's directly getting deposited into the water. So these are the 14 different animal species that we have in our library. Some of them are, I don't think have ever really come up. Other ones, such as Canada geese, we see quite often. 7 birds, 7 animal species. So this is kind of what we do once we get it back into the lab. It's a presumptive way, so this is basically just some of the, this is actually an animal sample. But what we do is once we get the DNA profile, now we can get a water sample and kind of match it to what we have there. So basically, once we have a water sample, we do some presumptive tests just to see for sure that what we're working with is E. coli bacteria. And some of it, this is what the water will look like before it's been inoculated by the contaminated source. So this is actually what it looks like afterwards. There's a tube in there that'll show growth from chemical reactions from the bacteria. And we put a little compound in there that'll fluoresce under UV light. So once we grow all that, we then have to do different isolates. So basically, each animal that we've done, they have different isolates. Usually, it depends how many we want it. We want to have, going back to the water part of it, if we just take one, we're just sampling one random bacterium that may be in there. So we grow up several so that we can take several, say about 10 or 20 isolates, so that then we get a bigger picture of what's in there, because there could be many different sources going in there. So they are isolated out, individually. All these are really small colonies of bacteria. So we'll just take one small one, then grow it up on these nutrient plates to promote the growth. This then confirms that what we have is E. coli bacteria. Again, this was started way back when the DEC was still using E. coli as their organism for shellfishing. And since this is what our DNA is based on, we've stayed with E. coli for verification. So this way we know every once in a while we'll get something that we've isolated that is not E. coli, so we won't include that in our analysis. So once we do that, then we can start doing the DNA preparation. So usually what that means when we're doing a water project is this is a very long process and it's also very expensive. So traditionally what we've done is once we got all this funding working and got it to the point where we could actually use it, and someone said they're from Havens Beach.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things we did as far as the application for this. There were some problems with Havens Beach. We were involved with the Suffolk County Health Department. We're involved with DEC, and we did do testing there to try to see what was going on with Havens Beach and why it was getting shut down. So it's a preparation process. So basically what it is in that case we knew beforehand. Or another time we'll do a project, say in Goldsmiths Inlet or different areas where they know they have a lot of water quality problems. So we'll do a sampling regime where we'll sample several times, we'll find areas of hot spots, and then the municipality, or whoever's working with us, can then let us know how many of those samples they want to run through the source tracking. This is basically all it is. It's pulse field gel electrophoresis. Way back when, there were kind of two ways to go. PFGE, which is the pulse field gel electrophoresis. The other one is PCR. PCR is the one that's generally more used now. It's a quicker process. This is a more exact process. So it's basically just molding a little piece of jello in there. We grow off the DNA. We kind of embed it in these small wells. This machine runs for 20 hours. The DNA will actually migrate down, and it's stained with a compound that we can then photograph. This is what it'll look like once it's done. And this is a water sample. We have standards on here we run. These are known, so we know what the molecular weight size is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those are all unknowns. As you can see, they all look the same. So this is either a water sample that's showing the same organism, or this may actually be a known source, in which case it's going to look the same. If it's a red box, it's probably going to look all like that. So we do the same thing. We get a water sample. We can then match it based on where these molecular weights are to our known source. This is just very boring numbers where how we convert it. But once we have those numbers, we then have 9 different databases that we run it through. So it's all, say, Manova statistical analysis package that compares all these things. So the first thing we do is when we get a water sample and we want to try to match it up to what we have. The first thing we want to know is if it's human or not human. That's actually going to be the easiest thing for us to remediate. Any of these other species, the remediation is different and a little bit more complicated. But in the case of Havens Beach, human versus not human, turned out most of what we were finding there was human. So that was kind of backtracking what we wanted to then look to see, what was going on. It was probably from, areas that, again, had old septic systems, hadn't been updated in a while.
How long ago did you do this work at Havens?
2008, it was a while ago. But we've since done it with other municipalities. We do a lot with kind of South. So if it's coming up as a high probability that it's not a human, we then try to see if it's one of these 3 broader. There's a bird, domestic, or wildlife. Domestic animals would be either horse or dog. Wildlife would be deer, red fox, raccoon, muskrat, and birds. There's 7 species of birds. Black duck, mallard duck, mute swan, cormorant, Canada goose, greater black-backed gull, herring gull. If we can then find out that it's highly bird, we can then see if it's bird versus not bird. So all these different permutations until we can actually try to get it down to a species level, which sometimes you can't. Sometimes we can only get it to, it's only coming up to, this one's very much a lot of human. Our pandas was iron here in Riverhead, I believe. Sometimes we can't really, it's coming up as non-human, but it's only 59% favorable for that, and that would be an unknown, because we don't have high, not human 98% or human 100%. That would be something we'd go back and look. But other than that, we've got a lot of either saying that what we're looking at here is human or not. Unknown. These were all from ones that we did for a sea grant with different areas. So I'm trying to run through that because I know we're behind. So are there any questions? I can go back to things.
So what's the conclusion?
Conclusion is we can use bacterial source tracking to try to find out what is in the water.
And what are you finding generally, if any?
Generally, it's going to be, we found Canada goose or a human. But in some cases, you do find things like horse. It just could be that they're, people bring down, there's some horse clubs, like to utilize the beaches sometimes. It just happens to be that the day that things were sampled happened to be within a day or so when the event happened, which that is one of the drawbacks, I guess, to this is that, I just keep forgetting I'm standing in the camera, is that these are all snapshots.
Yeah, right.
So what we're finding one day may not be the same result we get on another day, which is again why we've kind of gone with the newer approach where we'll do a sampling regime over, the summer or something, and then in the fall, okay, let's take a look at these. These are the high areas of high coliform bacteria counts. We'll do some DNA analysis and see if there's any correlation with, okay, there's maybe a horse down this day, but in general, if it's one that's going to be repeated, you'll start seeing, okay, there's actually Canada goose is appearing in 60% of these.
In the instances where you have human detectable events, is it your sense that that is a groundwater fed moment, or is that an illicit discharge?
Sometimes it's both. In most cases, it's probably groundwater. There have been times where we've used this for the Suffolk County Stormwater Program, where we have found it to be an illicit discharge. In that case, I think it actually was, when we did the analysis, the county had actually transferred it to a different municipality, and that municipality took care of the IDD in that case.
Any other questions?
I have a question. This molecular weight that you're using, is this going to be the baseline you want to use going forward?
We're going to use we're actually seeing if we can combine this with the PCR technology.
What's that?
Okay.
There's two different kind of technologies that came about 20 years ago. There was this, which was the PFGE, which is more exact, but it takes longer and it's more expensive. There is the newer, well, not newer technology, but the one that really took off and has been developing over the last 20 years is PCR. It's quicker. It may not be an exact, but we'd like to take advantage of something like that so that we can do kind of both, so that we can get a quick response on something and get a quick turnaround time. I know Christy worked with PCR more than I have, so she'd be able to get the timetable.
PCR is polymerase chain reaction. So it takes a segment of DNA and it replicates it so that you can actually see the results. Now, the issue with PCR is that you still need to get those results, send them out to the sequence so that you get a series of letters, and then you can plug that into a database and it'll tell you whatever the source is. There's also something called quantitative PCR, where it's real-time information. So as you run this process, it's coming straight up on your screen as to what's in the water and how peaked it is. So that's really useful for whether you have human versus non-human, because it'll come up right on your computer as that PCR is finished running.
Would that be something they use for these beach quality reports during summer?
Yes. It could be. It's typically not. In general, the beach inspection program where they close beaches because of pathogen concerns, that's typically less sophisticated than either of those analyses that you just heard described.
And that's
How much bacteria is there? This would come into
health, right?
So,
the Department of Health. This will come into play when you say, we have a bacteria problem, now what are we gonna do about it? We need to know what the source is, and that's why you would do that.
so the surprise that I'm hearing was, that conversation 20, 30 years ago, everybody said it was wildlife, always wildlife, nothing else but wildlife, and probably some dogs.
Correct.
And I know I shouldn't read too far into this, but a little bit of the surprise I'm hearing is that you're finding more human defects than the convention seems to have been 20 or 30 years ago. Is that fair?
It's tough to say. When we first started using this, I would say we found more human than we thought we would, but in general, it's not ever, if we do 10 or 20 isolates, very rarely is it predominantly human.
Yeah.
In most cases, it's 2 or 3 here, and again, because this is a snapshot, this is why we wanted to start doing PCR, is to start seeing, okay, is this just someone left a dirty diaper?
Well, I understand you're doing just snapshots and sample grabs and all that sort of thing. But again, the principle was this is all wildlife, it's all dogs, it's all domesticated animals and horses and animals that other people use, but it's not people. So whatever it is, that was the convention. And if you're doing this and you're finding a whole lot of activity, you're finding human and the usual suspects. So the conclusion I'm drawing is there's more human now that you're looking at this level of particular analysis than maybe was once thought.
Yes.
So I have a question. If it's all coming from people, then why is it harmful? If it's in our guts, if we have E. coli in our stomachs.
If you really want to know the answer to that question, is that from what I understand, human source E. coli is not as bad as, or I have that wrong.
Well, and then
It's actually worse for.
So how does it affect
Yeah.
us if we go swimming or anything like that? If there's high levels of pathogens.
Well, the worst part is, again, it's all tied into shellfish. Is that if they're straining all that out and then you're eating it, that's the main driver to this is the consumption.
Well, also, there's like E. coli in all of our guts. It's just a part of life. It's not pathological.
only for people in Sag Harbor.
Okay, all right, so talking about the world of Sag Harbor, right? But it's, my understanding is it's in your colon, like E. coli, right? So it's in a particular part of your digestive system. It's not something you're supposed to be eating, taking in, and absorbing potentially through your small intestine, where it can actually cause infection and illness. So it's a matter of keeping it in the lower parts of our intestines, where it's sort of a normal situation.
There's another thing to point out too. These fecal indicator bacteria that are measured, they are just that indicator bacteria. So we use them because they're easy to measure because we have a lot of good techniques for them. But it's not just that particular bacteria that we're concerned about. It's an indicator for a whole
There's other
What they hang around with.
So yeah, so there's a whole family of bacteria that comes when wastewater or animal waste or whatever is getting into the water. All of which are bad. It's not
So
just
the
that one.
implication for this discussion is, are the drain fields that this county is looking at for their new on-site waste disposal systems, where the waste that exits your home is treated in the 18-inch aerobic portion of your property, is there the expectation that not only nitrogen reduction loads being better than 75 to 90%, and pharmaceuticals being reduced considerably, what about other pathogens such as what we're just discussing? And the assumption is, yes, they should be reduced a lot better than putting them in a hole 12 feet deep, where there's no other biological activity generally occurring on pathogens. I don't know, But that's a question that people are looking at now as we get better information. It's great that you did this. And to the extent that, I mean, you know, the optimum outcome would be regularizing what you're doing with the county's water quality testing program to find out what pathogen defects are showing up at the same time you're doing other water quality things. But, you know, that's great. Yes.
I have a question, two questions. Are you testing for Vibrio or
No.
shellfish? Okay, and the other question is, I've always wondered on all these water quality tests, does it, because I'm an oyster farmer,
Right.
and the tide is extremely important.
Mhm.
Do you consider the tide, high tide, low tide, incoming, outgoing, flood?
We do if
I
we are
mean, does
looking
that
at a
change the
stormwater.
test- Does that change the test result? The tide?
It can. It usually, it doesn't necessarily, well, it can change the test results, but it's more of looking at the circumstances as to why something may be high. Because if it's a high tide event, it's going to collect more of what may be sitting up on land and carried out there. And depending on like where you are in Greenport, you've got some good water exchange in there. Other places like Goldsmith Inlet, they don't have as great of water. So when there is a high level of bacteria, it's going to take longer for that flush to happen to get that full flush of that area. There's also why there's areas by the New Inlet, why they're seeing better water quality, because you're getting more water exchange. So kind of like Allison said before about dilution being the solution, there is some truth to that, is that the more water flushing you're giving in there, the less bacteria will run. And that's kind of the other thing, is that the testing we're doing with E. coli, we're not a program approved lab. Even though we were set up years ago to kind of coincide with DC, we run split samples, we get the same numbers. We can't use the numbers we have in our bacteria counts to open up shellfish. DC is the only ones that can do that. So usually when we partner up, like the town of Southhold is a good example, they've actually teamed up with the DEC, where they can bring the DEC samples. They're all trained on how to correctly collect the samples, and then we run concurrent, DNA on those.
You do them close to shore, the samples also, or?
Depends on what they want.
What the site is? Okay.
Yeah. Again, whatever the municipality, whoever wants to do it, will go. Sometimes they have a set thing that uses the DEC. A lot of it goes with the DEC. Like here's their historical points. These historically have high levels of bacteria. We want to know the inputs. So these are the ones we want.
I've always wondered, can I see the DEC get samples on it? It doesn't seem to care what the tide is.
Yeah, years ago they used to, but now they go with a new SRS random sampling.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. We have 5 more minutes.
What do we say as advisors to the people who say, hey, in the winter in Sag Harbor, there's no public bathroom on the weekend?
That's an issue, You can't do your business if there's no place to go.
Well, you can, but it's
I'm sorry, thank you for clarifying.
Some of this money to get.
I'm assuming where we're planning.
Usually you can go to hotels. I think there's a thing where you're allowed to use bathrooms in hotels.
But you raise an interesting
I know
point.
it's true in New York, I have little kids, you're allowed to go in. I'm not sure about out here.
That's actually a very good point, because in New Suffolk, it's only open when the light port is there. And it has problems, so sometimes it's just totally closed because the plumbing is outdated. A lot of the beaches have either none or outdated. Some 2 studies would definitely be in Europe.
If you have a town beach that has outdated plumbing, I want you to go to your town board and let them know. The county is offering grants to help them upgrade their town park public restrooms to advanced wastewater treatment. They can get a whole bunch of money from the county to have less plumbing problems. So please, if you know of a beach like that, I want you to go to the town board and tell them to apply for this grant. It's a rolling deadline. They can apply anytime they want. I will write them a lovely letter of support.
Something like that would be a good ambassador suggestion. Go to your local civic association, ask them to take this on. Or find out if your local civic association has the trust. It shouldn't be up to me, it should be up to my civic association. I no longer live in New Suffolk, by the way. or to suggest it to someone who lives there to go there. So that would be a good thing from you who knows what's going on, not you personally, but from you experts, to know what citizens should do. Because a lot of us are like, yeah, we want to do something, but we don't know where to start, or we do the same little thing, and I've now done it for 10 years, and I'm tired of it. Why do I even want to go to those meetings? So to get like, why don't you take this? Who wants to take this on? We have these projects. Who wants to take it on? Just like the science in the hardware stores. And the message is to educate the public, not to punish the store owner, right? And the same with the town. The message is improvement for the common good. You know, so you can be positive about it, but you know, to give more guidance in citizen action, maybe. That's what
Is there a question over there?
More questions.
Well, I've got a couple questions, but one specifically in regards to the grant that you mentioned, and those public bathrooms in park. Many places, including Haven's Beach, which in Sag Harbor is the only place where they would have facilities that would qualify for that grant. It's only open a very short time, and we actually looked at it and said, is this reasonable to apply to upgrade bathrooms, which are only open several hours a day, you know, a couple of months a year? And actually, the conclusion was that probably shouldn't be a priority when there's such a small, you know, window of use.
So many, such a large population.
Yeah, but there's, the Haven Beach isn't used that much.
But, you know, it only takes a few people doing their business in the wrong place to kind of literally screw it up for everybody. I take your point, but, you know, I mean, there's a million metaphors where we can think of. One rocking your windshield as you're driving can ruin your day.
I mean, one argument is the bathroom should be open longer, but the point being, in terms of utilizing the funding, whether it's reasonable to use it in a facility that has very, very little total use.
Right.
But let me just ask you another. I thought I saw a slide flash by there which said Upper Sag Harbor Cove.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you specifically what you found, since it's on the slide and it went by so quickly that we couldn't see what it was.
I have to go back and look.
But while you're looking, I have another question, and that is, one of the issues that we have, again, I don't want to be too specific in Sag Harbor, but with a lot of boats, yachts, you've got questions of illegal discharges. And I'm wondering about the use of this technology to determine whether you do have a problem with illegal discharges.
They may not even be legal. They may be on-site waste disposal systems with a cesspool 70 feet from the water, and there may be a line of them along the edge of the water, and that's your source, which is why.
Well, that's my question.
But that's not illegal.
Well, but that's partly my question as to you know, we're going to be looking into two things. I mean, one is prioritizing the replacement of septic systems that are the highest problem because they're the most direct avenue to the water, and whether it's actually not only nitrogen but pathogens that you get. But also this question of determining whether you're having the illegal yacht discharge, vessel discharges, and whether you need to upgrade enforcement in order to prevent that.
To answer your question, yes. We actually did something in Setauket Harbor a few years ago.
And what did you do? You grabbed samples right next to the boats?
We grabbed samples. Unfortunately, it was in the fall by the time Brookhaven got to us. I don't remember if we got in there before Columbus Day weekend. But it was just to see if there was any change in the bacterial levels. It was done, I know, at least it ended by December. I honestly don't remember the outcome of it, other than they kind of looked to do maybe some more samplings within Setauket Harbor.
What about Sag Harbor too, just the seasonality aspect? You could look me up if you want, but I can show you a recent study done at the University of Rhode Island that analyzes alternative septics and seasonal communities in southern Rhode Island and kind of check organic water rate, especially the system that's used for antibiotics. 40 to 60% failure rates.
migrating from groundwater to the.
Right, nitrogen treatment, the whole thing. So these two don't work nearly as well as seasonal. You kind of need the bacteria breaking down the process. The seasonal aspect, it's a real concern in how you prioritize septics when you have huge seasonal variation. It's a very valid concern and might affect the prioritization there.
Okay, so what you're referring to is, for instance, the utilizing of this upgraded septic system. They may not work when you have a short-term use, and they're only being used 2 months a year.
Right.
That they may not be effective in that kind of situation, as opposed
Well,
to.
it just means there's a maintenance part of it, because we saw that on the septic tours, that the ones that are used seasonally, you have to have whoever your maintenance person is come out and reset it up for the season when you're gonna be there. It's not like it's like flip a switch and it's ready to go, right?
A lot of the new technologies depend on biological treatment, so you have to grow the bacteria in the system. So if there's not someone there using to go back throughout the year, then you can't grow that bacterial community. You use it for 2 months and then it dies over the winter, start up again, and by the time you get it going again, it's down again. So many of the technologies that rely on that have different concerns for seasonal than for full time.
The two current systems that have been approved by the county have about 40 to 60% failure rate in seasonal applications.
Oh. Okay, so I want to just put a quick pause on the discussion. This is great. I just want to do the poll real quick, and then we can get you guys signed out of it and continue the discussion as we clear out. Just before I go over this, on your agendas, please make note that May 11 has been changed to May 9th. There was a conflict of interest. There was a conflict in scheduling at the location, so we are switched to the 9th, not the 11th. Still the same time, still the same location, just the actual days changed, so it'll be Tuesday, May 9 instead of Thursday, May 11. So if all of you have your phones out, we're going to ask the question again. What do you think the main source of pathogens to your local waterways is? So again, you're just sending a text message to that same number that you did before.
Next time you could do emails. The people who are counting.
You can sign on your computer as well. So respond at poll EV. Right here. So you can join through there as well. No problem. Let's see, do we have any answers coming in? Okay, great.
The cute little system.
The text form? Yeah, I like it. It is fun. And this isn't the only way to answer. So the next couple will be multiple choice, so it'll be a little bit different. And it's anonymous, so nobody knows what you're answering.
Always good.
Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a few more seconds on that.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move on to the next one unless somebody has once more time. Okay, next question is going to be, pathogens are an issue in the Peconic Estuary. You are going to answer if you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. Oh, let me open up the poll so you guys can actually answer. So each one's associated with A, B, C, or D. So if you strongly agree, you'll click in A. If you agree, you'll click in B, etc., etc. And this also comes into play whenever you don't want to know what you're answering. Yep.
Okay, it seems to have stopped moving, so unless anybody stops me, I'm gonna move on to the next one. Okay, so next question is, how important, wait, let me activate it. How important is it to you to reduce pathogens from entering our local waterways? If it's not important, you send in the letter A. Somewhat B, very important C, very important, you'll just answer the letter D. All right, seems to have stopped moving for the most part. Right? All right, that seems to have leveled out. Anybody want to stop me? Nope. Okay, onward we go. So do you feel more informed about pathogens in our local waterways? So we feel very informed, press A. If you feel somewhat informed, but maybe we could have done a little bit better on more detail, then B. And if you feel like you've learned nothing today, then answer C. Okay, that seems to be everybody. Anybody want to stop me? Nope. All right. Onward we go. So over the next 4 questions, you're only going to answer A, B, C, or D once. So essentially what we're doing is ranking these topics. So which is the most important issue that PEP should focus on managing? So over the next 4 questions, these answers are not going to change. If harmful algal blooms are the most important to you, you will not answer B again over the next 3 questions after this. So we're going to rank these 4 topics. So which out of these 4 topics is the most important to you that PEP should focus on managing?
Okay, give it to me. Okay, this is a poorly designed question because D is the solution to B.
D is the
A solution to B.
A solution.
It is one solution, yep.
So then you're asking for what's the problem, but then you're also putting a solution in here. So this
What's
is-
the most important focus?
Ah.
Important issue for us to focus on managing.
Okay, seems like everybody has answered. Oh, not yet, not yet. Wait. That's okay. So all of you that answered B, you're not going to answer B for the next 3 questions. Same for whoever answered D. Okay. Anyone want to stop me? Okay. Oh, things are still coming through. That's okay. That's okay. All right. So again, the same answers. What is the second most important issue that PEP should focus on managing out of these 4?
We can do something about climate change. We can take all that algae that has lipids in it and turn it into fuel and drive our cars with it.
Get on that beat.
Give us a report next time.
What?
Give us a report next time on how you're coming on.
Yeah, it was for my graduate project. Looks good, it doesn't scale very well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so on to the next question. What is the third most important issue PEP should focus on managing? So if you've already entered A and B, you're only left with C or D. Oh, yeah, activate it. You guys would probably need to. Yeah. There you go. And then obviously the last question will be the least important, and that'll be the letter that you didn't answer yet. So the third most important issue PEP should focus on managing. I'm going to give it a few more seconds for any lingering texts.
These are very broad.
They are. They're broad topics, and they're meant to be broad.
Okay, it seems not to be changing. So then the last question is going to be the least important. So it's the one that you have not answered yet.
Henry has to go back and look.
I have to check just to make sure there's not a question. All right, everything seems to be stopped now. So that is the end of the polling. So they're all closed out now. And now we can just answer any questions, discussions that you might want to have in the last few minutes. Yeah.
My question is of personal interest. I've lived on the Shelter Island Sound since 1982. This year, I observed a bunker population that came in and stayed like I've never seen before. I'm wondering if, A, if it's any kind of indicator of water quality. B, I've learned that they're filter feeders, but they also excrete, so I'm wondering if there's a net gain or loss in them being there.
One of the things with the utility increase was that they were managed on a federal level. So because of those protections, that's why there was a larger population. Unfortunately, some of the reason why there was seemed like a bigger dial because there were that many more out there.
I'm sorry, were you saying there was a federal quota on catching them and that allowed the population to increase?
They decreased the quota for a while.
Yeah.
To help bring the population back. And
You can have mine.
but no, I think it is a good indicator for it.
And it's improved.
The second part of the question, think about, yes, they do excrete nitrogen and other nutrients as seen in their filter feed. But all the action it takes, just like when you eat, like if I eat a sandwich, or I use some of that to move around, and I use some of that to use energy just in your day-to-day operation. So the net negative in filter. In terms of the quota, it was first reduced in 2013. It was first federal quota ever put on winter. It's since steadily increased since then, and it's an issue right now where it's being debated right now about long-term methane management, what's going to happen. But they are the most important fish in our sea. So there's more we can have that supports all life.
So is there we've seen a lot of documentation about fish ladders going in. Is that going to continue because we want to request them?
What is that?
That's an
Fish
excellent
ladders.
question.
Fish ladders.
Well,
Don't they eat the mosquito larvae?
Many of them don't use fish ladders.
Who
They're totally saltwater fish. But other fish like herring,
I'm
eels,
thinking they
stuff like that. Yes, they
So
are.
they function in a very similar way in the food chain.
So they are also fish filter feeders, and they, like bunker, are bait fish to some of those bigger fish like stray bass and bluefish. So they are different. Their life history is a little bit different, but they're sort of in the same kind of category, you might say. And there's a lot of work going on the fish ladder front. So all the dams on the Peconic Estuary, going up as far as Edwards Avenue, are in some phase of development of planning or engineering or construction for fish ladders. Our program is spending a lot of time on that, but we've been very successful. We have a new state grant to build the fish ladder at the Woodhull Dam, which is the one sort of across the street from the county center. And we are working on an engineering project with Upper Mills Dam. Brookhaven has state funding to build the fish ladder at the Ford Road Dam. And the DEC this past spring completed a fish ladder at the Edwards Avenue Dam, which is the farthest upriver, which might seem a little strange, but they needed to do repairs there. So the fish ladder and the eel pass were put in at that time, so that when we get these other ones done, it'll be ready, the fish can get all the way up. So our goal is to get the fish all the way up.
And just to insert real quick before you guys leave, text leave to that message and it'll send you a message that you're out of the poll. So it just closes you out.
So all you text is leave.
And the benefits of getting the fish up is the water quality is improved by them? Has that been measured or?
Well, the ecosystem itself is improved, and more upper they can get better spawning areas, the more of them can spawn, the more herring and eel and whatever else, the more predator fish feed on those things, the more filter feeding those fish can do, the more the better.
But they were scrambling for mosquito larvae last year.
They will this year too.
The fish ladder, the main goal of the fish ladder is to increase the alewife population, to improve the alewife population, to give them access to their habitat. They have an important role in the food chain and all that. There are some ancillary water quality benefits, but that's not the priority reason for doing the fish ladder. It's more about rebuilding that population.
Okay. Alison, I've been reading in the newspaper lately, I've been really away from here now, it's that, about the local fishery on the east, really east end, like at the end of the Peconic Estuary, wanting to get a new study done, and have been asking the town supervisors and boards for support, and it's Emery Hasbrook who's supposed to be
Emerson.
Yeah, Emerson from Cornell, right? Who's supposed to be leading the fisheries. My question is, yes, it's the fishery industry that's requesting and some local people, but for instance, in the newspaper it said that Supervisor Russell said in Southhold, the fishery is not that important, but the recreational is. Are we gonna look at all aspects? Are we gonna include the new fish ladders being put in, the efforts being made? Are we gonna look at the people that turn the little creeks into Swiss cheese when they come out for the summer? And because that digging and that clamming and whatever, and when I kayak, I see so fewer blue crabs seasonally than I did before, and I haven't had my toes bitten for a while, and I swim just as much as ever. So the kind of, are we gonna look at that? Because when you get it down to the little tributary creeks, yes, that's habitat preservation at this point. Are we gonna wait till they all down the drain, because now they all down the squeaky habitat, because all the others have been condemned? Are we gonna wait for people to overfish that one? Maybe you're supposed to get a permit. It's very little money, but nobody does, and there's it's not being enforced. So you can come and take it back to my town, but really this is an issue for the entire Peconic Estuary. All the tributaries, everybody who lost the clam, and I don't want to take it away from anybody, but I am shocked on a weekday now that I have moved, and I drive to my old post office. How many people are in that one creek? And I realized there's less and less in West Creek where I used to live, and more they all put that downstream. And it's a thing, fishing and clamming, it's a thing that all the Latin population does because they did it at home too.
So our role in the Peconic Estuary program is to make recommendations about the need to manage things like a blue crab fishery in the creeks, for example. Our role is not to regulate them, like you said, at the town level, primarily on the east end, it's a trustee thing in the town that have.
But can we get support behind this study, and can we make suggestions what aspects should be included in the study?
That's not.
Recreational.
Yeah, that's not the intent of that study. So it's not. So I believe what you're referring to is a socioeconomic study that Emerson and John Scotti and a lot of folks they're pushing it from the town of East Hampton. It's a strictly socioeconomic study, and I think it's actually only commercial fisheries. So it's not about management of the fisheries. It's evaluating and figuring out what the economic impact is, both within the industry and the economic multiplier outside of the
This is
industry. As far as
America, and the bottom dollar counts. So can we in some way get benefit out of the recreational and the industry?
What they're studying, they're copying the study that was done in Rhode Island, Point Judith, Rhode Island. The idea was to value the commercial fishery there, so that they can get federal grant money to support fishery from collapse. So it's a similar study they're doing in East Hampton, proposed it to Southhold, and Southhold wasn't that.
they proposed in Southampton as well, who's somewhat interested, at least as it's being reported. Yeah, that's.
Because it's a commercial industry focus on.
Right. Well, again, that was the specific purpose of just this one stuff.
Right.
I mean, yeah, and there's ongoing fishery management studies that the DEC is conducting all the time as far as their responsibilities for managing the fishery on the part of the ASFMC and NMFS.
Yeah,
So.
but you know, you can all the rules and regulations and the permits, if it's not being enforced, it's not going to be there. My only concern is, are we at risk of losing this recreational aspect that everybody very much enjoys? Or should it be, is there any way that we can make sure or even look into if this is sustainable or not?
So, we're over time, but I encourage you all to have discussions, so people probably need to leave. So thank you all for coming. Again, don't forget to email me on topics that we discussed whenever you can see them. Thank you so much for coming.
Right.